Alright guys, this tutorial is going to be on how to create a feature story for the yearbook. I'm going to go through the steps necessary to write a effective and solid story for your pages. Okay, so first and foremost, we are looking at 3 different quotes. Student went out and interviewed different people for this story. I can't emphasize the importance of a good interview enough. A good interview will always yield or give you the best stories. So if you are out interviewing, do not accept short answers. Do not accept simple answers. Dig a little deeper. Ask follow-up questions. Force that student, athlete, barber, cosmetologist to elaborate. Why do you feel that way? Can you give me an example? What do you mean? Questions like that can help them elaborate their quotes and interviews. Once you have all of your interviews for all the people for your story, you're going to review those interviews and your story topic will emerge from those interviews. If people are talking a lot about leadership and how that program helps them become better leaders, then your story should be about leadership. If the story's talking about how it's a personal thing and they are doing this for their grandma or grandpa and why they're doing it for the grandma and grandpa, then your story should be about that and that person and what they're telling you. So the quotes will give you a hint or at least guide you to what your story is going to be about. Once you figure it out, find the topic, then it's time to revisit all of the quotes and you're going to select the best quotes for your story, leaving the best quote for the end. Okay, so right here we have 3 quotes that we identified. The first quote's by Hugo Dominguez. He's a 9th grader. Always verify spelling, always verified grade, classification. Second quote's by senior Mia Workman. And the third quote's by Matthew Estrada. All right, so we have identified these 3 quotes for our cross-country story. So you're going to go on a word processor, either a Microsoft Word or Google Docs or something like that, and you're going to start writing your story. Okay, do not start typing your stories directly onto your yearbook page in Walsworth. All right, the reason being is that these word processors have a built-in spell check, grammar check that is more advanced than the Walsworth one, and it gives us a little opportunity to revise the rough drafts. It is also advisable that you guys write these on your OneDrive school Word documents where you can share them, and it's a live document where you share a link to the editors or myself, and we can click the link, go straight into your document, and do live edits right on that document without having to print anything or anything like that. It's just a much faster process. All right, so going back, I'm going to flip to this other tab with the finished story, okay? I want to bring your attention to this first paragraph, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it to you. It's 5 in the morning and runners are up and moving to get ready for what seems to be the race of their lives. They arrive at the location, adrenaline pumps and hearts race as they begin warm-ups and jog around the course to familiarize themselves with the task at hand. The officials finally call up sections to the start line after what seems like an eternity. The race nerves set in on the starting line and suddenly there is a silence of anticipation. On your marks, get set, go. The race begins and the silence turns to roaring noise. Our lead or our intro paragraph has to be very descriptive, very detailed, and has a narrative tone. All right, what I like to tell my students is that pretend that I, Mr. Esparza, am blind. I cannot see where you're at. I cannot see what you're doing. I'm completely blind. So you are describing the scene to me so that I can see, I can hear, I can feel, I can touch, I can smell, I can taste what's going on at that event, at that place, in that kitchen, in that classroom. You get the point. A couple of things to consider when writing our leads. All right, these need to be written in third person. Okay, make sure that your tense is always the same. If you're writing in present tense, keep it in present tense. Writing in past tense, keep it in past tense. Don't mention the name of the school because it's redundant. It's redundant when you're mentioning the name of the school. This is for our book, so we know that it's a Socorro yearbook story. You don't have to put Socorro anywhere inside that first paragraph. Okay? Okay, so that is your hook. Okay, that's what's going to engage people into your story. The second paragraph is our thesis. Okay, it's our nut graph. It's what tells the reader exactly what the story is going to be about. It has to be concise. It has to be straight to the point. I'm going to read it to you. Cross country isn't just a racing sport. It is also a mental one. It teaches athletes not to stop even when their bodies are telling them to. The runners have been training all summer and all season so they can build up their stamina and speed to be some of the best runners in the country. All right. So that we know that this is a mental sport. It's challenging, right? They've been training a lot and they're trying to be their best. So those are the things that this story should be about, right? Okay, so directly after that second paragraph, we start bringing in the quotes. Okay, now let me remind you, we have our quotes already selected over here. Our first quote is going to be by Mr. Hugo Dominguez, who's a 9th grader. So I'm going to jump back to the story and notice how this paragraph begins with quotation marks. Okay, so our 3rd, our 5th, and our 7th paragraphs, if your story is that long, need to begin with quotation marks. They also need to end with quotation marks. All right, so I'm going to read it to you. I learned to pass my limits and how to push myself to get to where I want to be, freshman Hugo Dominguez said. I never thought that I could achieve those rankings when I started this year. I'm going to go back to the original quote. It's all together, look. I learned to pass my limits and how to push myself to get to where I want to be. I never thought I could achieve those rankings when I started this year. Now, it is up to you, the writer, to find a natural and logical place where I can divide this quote up to have a first part of the quote and then a second part of the quote. Okay, let me go back to the paragraph. So we identified this as being the first part of the quote. We're going to pause by adding a comma and then ending the quote here, but then identifying who said it by full name, full title, and it's always going to be person said. Okay, not person added, not person revealed, not person disclosed, not person stated. It's always going to be person said. Their title will not be capitalized, all right? The title will be lowercase unless it begins a sentence. So as you can see right here, freshman is not capitalized. Then we add a period. We end that punctuation. We call this the identifier on this paragraph. Then we continue the paragraph by continuing the quote. So the second part of the quote that we had identified from before over here, right? We will add to the second part of this paragraph, to end the paragraph. And it begins with quotation marks and ends with quotation marks. Okay, so that is what we call a quote paragraph correctly written. After you have written your third paragraph, which is the quote paragraph, then you're going to add a transition. All right, the transitions will explain, elaborate, or tell us something that we don't know or don't see about that event, that person, that feature, the topic of your story. These are usually 1 to 2 sentences, and they're similar to the thesis where they are direct and to the point, and they're going to introduce the topic of the next quote. Okay, so this one is talking about finding success as a team. So let me read the next quote to you. I feel like over time, within the years, I grew closer to some people more than others. Senior Mia Workman said, I do consider us a really big family when we cheer for each other as we finish the race. Okay, you will notice that the structure of this 5th paragraph is exactly the same as the 3rd paragraph. Okay, it's going to be exactly the same as the 7th paragraph, where it begins with quotation marks, ends with quotation marks, and in the middle, we've split up the quote from our interviews to identify who said it by title, first name, last name, and person said. Senior Mia Workman said. Let me remind you that titles are not capitalized at this point. Okay, we do need a comma here for pause. All right, just an addition, punctuation will always go inside of the quotation marks, whether it's a period, comma, exclamation mark, all punctuation will always go inside to the left of that quotation mark on top right. Okay, then we add another transition and then our final quote. Okay, and then here is the key or the trick to writing a really solid feature story. I advise you that you guys identify your best quote from your interviews and use it as your last paragraph in that same structure as paragraph 5, same structure as paragraph 3, and that will be the end. Your story does not require a conclusion a written conclusion as you're used to in English class, but rather you're going to end it with your best quote. All right, hopefully that helps.